the idea of taking responsibility for your own actions, your own self. We started out this conversation talking about a rabbit hole that I went down of watching this Cults to Consciousness podcast where people talk about being in high demand organizations or religions and how people are kept in those organizations. And sometimes that is through this idea of you're responsible for everything that happens to you. And we talked about in the bigger body of the show, that's not always resourceful. It's also not necessarily true. And there is some real value in recognizing your own part in it so that you can get yourself the heck out. Hi, I'm Liz Larson.
And I'm Bill McKenna.
And together, we created the Cognomovement system. And we'd like to welcome you to the New Life Perspectives radio show,
where we're going to be sharing with you tools, tips, and ideas that are going to change your life.
Hey, everybody in UK Health Radio Land and here on YouTube and all the places where you like to listen to your podcasts. This episode does have some adult content. We're talking about trauma and some adult topics. So maybe this one's not right for your little kiddos. And also, we just want to issue a trigger warning. If you are sensitive to subjects around the topic of trauma, just be aware on this episode, you may run into some of those things. For everybody else, listen and tell us how you feel about this topic and about this episode. We'd love to hear your feedback. Hello in UK Health Radio Land. I'm Liz Larson and I'm here with my friend,
Bill McKenna.
Hey, Bill McKenna. And we're the team that hosts the New Life Perspectives radio show here on the UK Health Radio Network, as well as on YouTube. And anywhere that you like to listen to your podcast, we can be found now. So look for us for some extended content and just some awesome episodes about everything life-changing. Bill and I love to talk about things that weren't available before on the planet, ways that you can change your life, ways that you can create new perspectives, ways that you can just create a new life that just weren't available before. So today, Bill and I are always talking behind the scenes, and today we're talking about something that I have gone down a rabbit hole on recently. So I found this podcast called Cults to Consciousness. It's a young woman named Shalise Ansola who is doing this podcast. It's a new show on YouTube, relatively new, and she's growing. So if you have an interest, go check her out. But she has this very loving and kind way of talking about people who are in what she calls high demand religions. That those religions obviously do not see themselves as a cult. She was a Mormon, a traditional Mormon, that she now considers maybe was a bit culty, but high demand religion. But she talks to people who have escaped or found their way out, who have experienced tremendous trauma due to the way that they were raised or taught or learned or the trauma they experienced inside the cult. And she really is very, I think, honest about it, but also she's not super judgmental about it. She does say when they did things right as well. So if you know what I mean, like she's not nasty about it. And I really appreciate that. I was raised in a high demand religion, which I've shared with many people. So I share this.
So are you saying, Liz, that you were part of a cult?
Well, when you put it that way. So not a traditional cult, but there are definitely people on the planet who would say that. So what would be the definition? There's a wide range, but really, I like the way she describes it, high demand. It keeps you away from other people. it prevents you from having a greater worldview. The religion I was in does shun people or expel them from the organization, and then none of their family members can talk to them again. So that has some of those traits, if you will, that add for a cult. Some of the things it didn't do was it didn't take all of your money, that sort of thing, but it was quite patriarchal. And these things, and I think any organization that anyone could ever be in, there's always a chance for trauma. But when you're raised in a high demand religion, your worldview is different from other people. What you know for the world to be and what you don't know is different from the regular average American. Like in some of the cults, they don't know who the president is. In some of these high demand religions, they don't know that a woman has a choice in who she marries or whether she marries in a polygamist marriage, whether she has many, many other wives with her. When you're raised in it, you don't know the difference between that and the outside world. And that's one of those things. Anyway, this rabbit hole took me into some of the other things she talked about were like the Nexium organization, which made the news recently, which was a health and wellness organization that ended up branding people and, taking people's money and being very, very abusive. So it sparked this conversation between Bill and I about the topic of taking personal responsibility for your life and your trauma. And there's really a resourceful way to do this and a super unresourceful way to do it. It comes down to, is there victim shaming, which is, one of those terms that people are using, or which can be unresourceful, or is there value in being able to find where you have been responsible for your own part in things and where you can shift that? So we're going to dive deep today, you guys. We're going to dig into it because there are parts of this in our Cognomovement system that we utilize and parts of which, we have had to explain to our own practitioners, our own students, why there are parts of it we use. But it turns out, did you know this, Bill McKenna, that this taking responsibility for your own trauma is used to control people in cults?
Isn't that amazing? I didn't really realize it, but, I'd seen a few different specials, these different Netflix and different things. And they were, there was one, I think, called Just One Taste, or also known as Om. And that was very strange, really, really strange. I think that is disbanded. And then, there's obviously the one that you're talking about, but there's been a lot of documentaries made about this where they basically utilize the person's trauma and them being victimized to somehow manipulate and exploit them and get them to doubt themselves and to maybe, do lots of things that they wouldn't do ordinarily. So anyway, and I say this here and I'm wearing this shirt, right?
If you could see Bill on camera,
right?
He looks a little culty, little cult leader-esque.
I've got a white shirt on today.
Yeah.
So
okay, so let's just dig into it, Bill. We're talking about this because there is a way that we utilize it. So sometimes it's phrased like, have I ever? Let's talk about this principle and why we use it and what we think is good about it. And then we'll talk about how other people use this principle in a way that can be really, really damaging. We want people to hear this and hear both sides to know, are you being taught this principle in a way that's resourceful or unresourceful? So this is one that you have liked particularly over the years to use in a certain way. So share with everybody how you utilize this tool.
So the way that I utilize this, there's a basically a principle, and this principle is that all things are connected and all things originate from yourself. So this principle, if something is showing up in my life, we look back at your life and say, have I ever done that? Now, most of the time when you encounter this, right, somebody is showing up and they are talking behind your back, or they stole your stuff, or they did something to hurt you in some way, that most part, the essence of it, whatever that essence is that you feel annoyed at, you basically say, oh, what really annoys me about this is that I was betrayed. What really annoys me about this is that they didn't consider me, that they were gossiping, whatever may be the case. And you look back at your life to see, is there been a point have anyone show up in your mind's eye that felt that way about you? You may not agree with them. You may see it as a misunderstanding, these sorts of things. But ultimately, what ends up happening is for the overwhelming vast majority of people, they see the time that they did it. Now, it always feels like a mountain against a molehill. It seems enormously painful when somebody does it to us, and it seems so minor when we do it to another person. The nature of this, that it's so large and looming in our lives, is to call our attention to it. We would never call our attention to something that was minor. But the fact that it's major, it's kind of pushed in your face so hard and so aggressively to get you to actually see. It is basically the two halves of one coin. I get to experience what it's like to gossip and what it's like to be gossiped about. I get to experience what it's like to break somebody's trust. And then I also get to the other side of the coin to feel what it's like to be betrayed. So in this, the completion of a lesson, I cannot really complete a lesson unless I fully understand both sides of it as an experience. When I've experienced both halves of this, and I say to myself, you know what? I don't like it. I don't like it. Well, if you don't like it, stop doing it. That's it. That is the ending of one's karma. If I truly stop doing the essence of it to others, typically that's when it all ends. As we say, the life is but a play, and you've got all these actors. Some are playing the victim, some are playing the perpetrator, but all of them, when the lesson is over, it's over. I've learned, hey, don't steal people's stuff. It sucks, to have your stuff stolen, right? Well, then what ends up happening is all the actors, once the lesson's been learned, all the actors leave the stage. There's no need for it anymore. And typically what will happen is that it literally doesn't show up anymore. There's a really interesting thing that we know about this phenomenon. And that is how you know if you have karma. Well, your body will tell you. If, let's say, you've got a situation where, somebody steals something and you're like, oh, damn, wow, my thing's gone. Okay, well, I guess I got to go get a new one or, file a report. And you don't feel much. You probably don't have anything. You don't have any karma. But if you are ruminating about this, running around the neighborhood, inflamed and accusatory, and you feel literally this overwhelming feeling in your body, and it keeps you up at night, and it's there the next morning, and it's, damn, I'm going to get them. Oh, man, it's on, right? Guess what? Psst, your body is telling you, have I ever? And with that, you'll be able to see the times that maybe you have. And with that, you end your karma. And it happens like that. It's so fast, it's so easy, and you can go from a level 10 anger to a 0. Like nearly instantly, it's laughable once you know these few little secrets. Now, this would be a very appropriate use of victimization, meaning, I understand how does my body act when I really have a thing, right, that I have karma in, and what is a fast way for me to grow from it? Meaning, wouldn't you love it? Wouldn't you love it in your life if the repetitive problem that keeps you up at night and then you're shaking and you're whoa, and it doesn't go away, if it's lasting longer than 15 minutes, you want to question yourself. That's what you want to do. If it just goes away, you don't have anything. So anyway, that is the way we utilize this within Cognomovement, is to be able to see the essence of it and end it quickly.
Yeah, so there are times when it's super, super resourceful. As a grown-up person, where you find that something is like irritating you, annoying you, or you feel, let's put it victimization light, victimized by someone in your family, that kind of thing, where the pattern keeps repeating, it can be really resourceful. And the value is that you kind of see where you maybe have done that thing, gossiped or, talked behind somebody's back or controlled someone in a way, right? And once you see it and you're like, oh, dang, I have done that thing. And I certainly wouldn't want to be judged as harshly as I'm judging this. It makes it way easier to let it go from your side. Where it really seems inappropriate, where you run into off the ditch, is where there's things like an assault, things that happen in your early childhood that of course you had no part in. You really had someone using their status in your life to abuse you. That's where you run into a real brick wall with this. People's minds, there's no way to get around that where it doesn't seem like victim shaming. And that's the place where cults will utilize this tool, or high demand organizations, to blame you when you realize there's a problem in the organization. So we need to hear from the good folks at the UK Health Radio Network. And when we come back, let's talk about the dark side of how this idea can and is being used to really hurt people and to keep them in organizations where they need to get out. So UK Health Radio, take it away. And we're back. We're talking about, the idea of victim shaming or taking responsibility for something that's happening in your life, some trauma that you've had. I think the delineation is, Bill, that it's something that's happening in your grown-up life that keeps repeating. And you have to figure out where you have control over it, because where you have control over it gives you the most power to recognize your part in it. I may not have shared this before, maybe I have, I don't remember. It's something I keep really private. But when I was really young, I ended up married to a man who had mental illness. He was much older than me. He was very, very manipulative and controlling, and it ended up being a very abusive, violent situation. I had to escape with my 4-month-old child. Escape. Very serious, bad situation. Now, if you had asked me, Bill, have you ever? No, I've never been insane and physically abused anyone in my life. So I wouldn't have been able to put that on myself. However, what I did do is what's called tape edit. And I had just the ability to see this. Where could I have taken a left turn and gotten out of that situation before it happened? So for myself, I never carried this thing with me. I never carried tremendous fear. I never considered myself a victim. I was in a really bad situation and I got out, but after a year. Many people stay in this for many, many years because they can't find a way out. But I had that clarity when I was that young to know at this moment, I should have said absolutely not. No. It wasn't just this guy. There were other people involved, taking advantage of a person who really, I didn't know better. I did not know there were monsters on the planet. At the time, I thought everyone deserved help. Everyone deserved to be supported and loved and to have someone be kind to them. That's what I thought I was being. Also because of the religion I came out of, right? This person is presenting themselves to be cared for and nurtured. They need help. Of course, that was all by design. But I learned to recognize the signs of that kind of behavior. I learned what that was about. And I recognized where I had a gut instinct that I didn't listen to. So in my own way, I was able to take responsibility for at least my little parts in it and learn to never do that again. So how that played out is in my relationships moving forward, if I saw even a tiny bit of sign of that pattern, I confronted it or excused myself and got the hell out, right? Years later, I met and married the man I'm married to now. And even with him, there were things that I had to say, hold on. Here's something I've experienced in my life before. This looks similar. Now, maybe I don't have good enough judgment because I've experienced that and I'm sensitive about it, but we need to clarify a real hard line for me. That behavior is unacceptable. I can't move forward in our relationship if that behavior continues, right? So I took responsibility for myself and my own safety and my own experience. However, when you're a child who's been traumatized, abused, sexually assaulted, how do you take responsibility for that? And that's where we run into trouble with this premise. But there is a way to utilize being responsible for your actions when you do have control of yourself as an adult, right?
Right. So let's say you do have a trauma from your childhood, and, there's listeners across the globe right now listening to us, and it's true, right? Here for us, in our lifetime, right? It just happened. We encountered the boogeyman. The boogeyman actually showed up, and he'd done some things, and it was horrible. And you had no way out. You're literally a child that's dependent with no way out, no ability to support yourself, no ability to protect yourself. There's nothing that could be done, and you got victimized. Now, I think the important thing here is that with the work we do is to recognize, okay, I've been traumatized. And with that traumatization, what happens most often is that in our bodies, it gets stored, and we create like circumstances in our lives. And without us really having karma in the way that I explained it earlier, you're literally simply generating a certain feeling, energy, vibration, whatever you want to call it, of the victim. Like, you know what? I've been beat up and I'll get beat up again. You know, there is the entire thing. I can't tell you how many times people who have been assaulted as a child, molested, end up having the exact same thing happen in adulthood, or as we've seen, happening to their own children. And as well, and it's because of this neurological pattern of trauma that's set up in the body. Now, I guess the whole point of this, of bringing this out, is that you can end that trauma cycle for yourself and your kids.
Pause for just a second, Bill. So Bill and I really have maybe a different way of looking at the word trauma. It's a big deal right now. Trauma is everywhere. Everybody's talking about being trauma informed. And the way that we look at this, because we're looking at it through the lens of how your body reacts. So we would say that trauma is an experience or a group of experiences that a person had that taught their body how to be in fight or flight. So if you were molested as a child, you may have the automated reaction. Your nervous system is fight or flight all the time. And so you are constantly being aware or setting up yourself in protection against that situation of being hurt, being harmed. But the weird result is that you're also on the other side drawing it in all the time. This is what Bill's talking about. A pattern gets established in the nervous system, in the limbic system, between the amygdala and the body. And the body will have a feeling about this, an overall sensation of either it's fear, pain, panic, could be anything. And it sends a signal to the brain, and the brain says, yep, that's the thing. Really be concerned about that. And then it sends a signal back down to the body, and that signal gets bigger, and then back to the brain. And the brain says, yep, be concerned about that. And it actually creates an electromagnetic hormonal signal, a field, like a tractor beam. And you'll see that people repeat the same pattern of their childhood again and again and again in one way or another. And they'll say, it's true, I'm a victim of this. It's been my lifelong pattern. Well, what we would say about that, it is not a conscious decision anyone makes. Let me go out and get abused again. Let me go out and find another abusive husband. Let me go out and find somebody who takes all my money again. No. What it is that there is this constant awareness of it, a constant worry. And that constant worry just sends a signal out. And we find our match. Our nervous system, when it's in fight or flight, finds its match again and again and again and again. So this is the way Bill and I utilize this. When you can recognize that very unique sensation and very, very familiar sensation, you can put an end to it. So there's a real value in noticing how your body and mind in concert, plus, your consciousness gets added, is playing out the pattern. That's really the part where we're advocating super taking responsibility for whatever you feel that might be drawing that pattern to you. And it's a slippery slope, Bill, when we're talking about things like, childhood abuse, victimization, like I was talking about, people who've maybe been raped or things like that. It's a slippery slope. But the only true power a person has is in being able to end it for themselves And what we really mean, how we really utilize this, is to discover that initial damage to your nervous system and correct it. Get the body to where it's absolutely neutral on that subject, meaning it's a story that happened one time in your life. It's like a book on a shelf. You know it happened. You know that it has its highs and its lows. It has its protagonists and its antagonists. It may have been awful and horrific, and there were people to blame. But when you think about it, you're like, oh, I can see all of that. And right now, I'm going to turn around and move forward in my life and leave that somewhere in the past, because it's no longer active in the physical body. So I think that's a really resourceful way to use it. But there are also still, as we're talking about it, people who use this idea against people to get their way, to keep them manipulated.
Well, yeah, you're right. I think really, the essence of it, what you're really saying, the big takeaway here is that when we can literally use the body to heal the body, mind, spirit, where you literally simply just don't feel it anymore. I like to call it emotional amnesia. You know about the event, like Liz says, but you feel nothing about it. With that, it allows you to be in a place of wisdom. Like, you're neither attracted to that particular cycle anymore. You won't find yourself inadvertently in the wrong position. I know people that literally have the exact same crime happen to them countless times.
Yeah.
And I mean countless times, exact same actual crime. And once that is like poof, vaporized, where they no longer have that victim energy in their physical body, that it emanates that, it doesn't occur to them anymore. These are traumas actually attract that type of victimization. There was this amazing, back early in the 90s, we had talked about this in the past, where there were all these inmates in prison. This is not jail, this is prison. And they took, basically what they did is they lined up all these prisoners that had done all kinds of crimes against other people. So very specifically, it was against other people. And what they did is they filmed the street of New York, thousands of people coming down the street in New York. And they would say, pick your victim. And they ran thousands and thousands of tests, and they came away with something so interesting. And that was that there was an incongruency in their gait, in their posture. And that was going to be who their victim was. And it wasn't whether the person was male or female or age, it was their gait. That was the thing. And what we know from the work we do is, if you have a trauma, it's going to show up in your gait. There's a subtlety there. Anyway, it's really interesting, because when this goes away, Liz Larson had discovered that the spine straightens up, the gait becomes different. It's one of the things that Liz in the practitioner program for Cognomovement teaches people how to know when a person's issue is resolved. Keenly aware, what were they walking like and what are they walking like now? Really an interesting subtlety.
So it is time for us to hear from the good folks at the UK Health Radio Network. And when we come back, we'll continue this conversation about, personal responsibility when it comes to trauma. It's tricky. So UK Health Radio, take it away, and we'll see you in a minute. And we're back. We are talking about the slippery slope and the real value of taking personal responsibility in your trauma. So let's dig in just a tiny bit more about this. So does it mean that when you realize, okay, either I've done that to somebody else before, like maybe stole their boyfriend, like maybe gossiped about them, maybe victimized somebody ourselves, maybe, was harsh or unkind or whatever. When we recognize that we're doing that and we reconcile that within ourselves, that's one way of really ending a pattern. And then there's the way that you notice in your body what that feels like and how your body maybe is emanating that pattern. You can end it there. But there's a way that these high demand religions and organizations, they're not always religions, utilize this to continue to victimize a person. So they'll say, well, the reason you don't like our organization is you're not taking responsibility for yourself, right? So does it mean that when you take responsibility for your own self and your own actions and the own way you got into something, that the people who are responsible for doing a bad thing, that they don't have to pay for it? Or does it mean that you stay in a situation that you've recognized is painful to you because you're taking responsibility for it? Is that what it means, Bill McKenna?
Gosh, it's so screwed up. It's so darn screwed up. When you get people that are psychopaths or sociopaths, they'll do these type of things, just a Peruvian mind screw type of situation, right? Where you're like, you're somebody who's not taking responsibility and, all these different things, and I think the important thing here is to kind of recognize what's going on. Is somebody doing this to get something out of me, to control me, to get my money, to get my body, to get me to do something, to get me to not do something?
Even just compliance, right? Even just
compliance, just to comply. So is the person have no vested interest in you? Meaning, no, hey, I like you enough, but here you go. I'm just going to tell you, hey, go off, go on your way. You're free to go. There's no emotional kind of manipulation or ties. They're merely, pointing something out, and it's for you to evaluate, and it's all on you. You don't feel anything from them. It's a self-evaluation that could it be profitable to my growth and my understanding? Am I free? Am I free to walk out the door? Is my finances free? Am I in a situation where, like my family, this is so often happens where if you don't comply, then the family will shun you and you're literally lose your family.
Absolutely. And I think, I want to say this and be really clear. There are people who do not belong in your life. If someone is abusing you, they do not belong in your life. If you're in a religion where someone is controlling you and hurting you, you don't belong in that religion. You get out, you get away. The issue is after, how long do you carry that with you? Because if you carry that injury with you in your physical body, remember that we say trauma is just an experience that taught your body to live in fight or flight. That experience could be not getting a popsicle when you were 4. I told a story before about a man I was in class with once who believed his father had hung him over the edge of the Grand Canyon when he was 3. It didn't happen. Another time when they were playing at a playground, his dad did what dads do, and they hang kids upside down in fun and play. His little body connected the two. It was a lie that he lived with his whole life, right? So there are things that happen that feel like trauma that classically wouldn't be considered trauma, but our bodies record them as that. And then there's things that are real abuse, real crimes. And those people need to be held responsible. Agreed? However, sometimes when you get out of a situation like that and somebody's held responsible, then you go on and you become a champion for that cause, right? If you were sexually abused, you're now a champion for sexual abuse, or become a therapist to serve people who are sexually abused. The issue is there that may continue to play out in your body again and again and again. It becomes your whole life. It draws itself to you again and again in one way or another. What we think is really important and how we think this can be used resourcefully is that you clear it out of your body till you're at neutral, and it will give you the 10,000-foot view. Here's how I got into that situation. I will not be doing that again. Tick. Here's who I held responsible who was not responsible. Here's who I then harmed in some way because I thought they were responsible, and they're not. They weren't a part of it. Like the kid who thought his dad hung him over the Grand Canyon, you know? Oh, and here's how I'm free to move forward in my life. These are the steps. This is what needs to be examined so that you no longer have this as your life, have it playing out again and again in one way or another. I just want to reiterate again, it does not mean that someone who did something bad to you should not pay for that, especially if it was a crime. Absolutely. But you will carry it with you until you get it to neutral in your body, until your body stops being in fight or flight about it. That's the most important thing. So these people who are in these cults who were held in by, you need to be held responsible for whoever's victimizing you. That is where this is used in a real negative way. If it continues to hurt you, it's not good. What we're advocating for is a way to do this where you can see that problem from that 10,000-foot view and see all the parts in neutrality. And then you get to choose what you do next. Not your nervous system, not your fight or flight, not your response, your automated response, but you, with your logical mind and your higher self and your consciousness, choose what to do and where to go next to actually have a life free from that. I think that's the most valuable, the most important part. What do you think, Bill?
I think you're right. And I think, as I'm listening to this, I was thinking to myself, from a different angle, but the different angle is just basically my physical experience in my body. Like, well, for me, like my body, when I'm traumatized, or maybe I have karma or whatever, from something, I literally feel a vibration. It is so annoying. I just hate the way it feels. It is overwhelming. And my body can even shake, or, I feel like I'm going to pass out, or, I'm and it's horrible. But I think what I, from a real physical, visceral experience, what Liz is saying is the work that Cognomovement is about is literally, I feel like, there's nothing. There's literally, my body is calm. It feels nothing, absolutely nothing. So with that, I can move forward easily because I don't feel anything. I am completely good. And I can be very logical about whatever step I'm taking. Oh, that doesn't look good right over there. I'm going this way. Whereas when I have that, I have very limited choices.
You're right. I mean, it's one of those things where you will continue to relive that in one way or another. Like, let's say you kind of had an overbearing, controlling father, right? You'll find maybe your best friend is in some way overbearing and controlling, or your spouse is now overbearing and controlling. There's some aspect of this where our nervous system is also drawing it in for one, but also trying to work it out.
Yeah.
Will I get it right this time?
Right.
But more often than that, something else happens. It's this automated response was, well, I'm going to try on that person again and see if they love me this time.
Oh, yeah.
It's like trying on an ugly sweater, only the reverse. I always say you try on an ugly sweater and sometimes it's real cute, but most of the time it's just plain hideous.
Right.
Right. So you'll be in that same abusive relationship. I was talking to somebody recently who said every person they had ever dated, ever had cheated on them in the most horrific ways, to the point where they had reconciled it in that where, okay, I'll just bring in people into my marriage, third parties, fourth parties, so that my partner will then be legally able to cheat on me, and then it won't be behind my back. It did not work. The person still found someone else to cheat with them. And they said, I just can't understand why this keeps happening to me. Well, the why is about 1,000 different reasons, which I think we'll go into in our extended conversation, because this gets real interesting, the whys, right? But on the surface, it looks like people just keep hurting me again and again due to no fault of my own. And I just can't get out of the pattern. Well, let's change the word default and put it into choice. There are things that person is choosing again and again that if they had that 10,000 foot view or neutrality on the subject, and they knew where the original injury came from, that's important. We'll talk about that in the extended conversation too. If they knew where the original injury was and could get themselves to neutral, to where that chapter, that whole book is somewhere on a shelf somewhere, and now you could choose differently, life would be different. It would no longer apply to them the way it did before, right?
Exactly. It just doesn't apply to you anymore. And, it's like we talked about earlier, the same identical effect. The actors leave the stage. You're done. You don't need it anymore. You're no longer emanating that particular signal that is attracting it and making it, anyway, we'll have a more in-depth conversation here in the extended content.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you also don't continue to make the same choices. You just don't continue to make the same mistake, choose the same person. You just don't continue the pattern. You have freedom from it. I think that's really, really so important. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons to use this kind of a method of being able to look at yourself and see where your choices have made the difference. I mean, this is the positive side of it, right? Mm-hmm. This is the positive side of taking a look at your own victimhood and finding out where there is choice. But the truth is, most people cannot see that choice at all when their body is in that fight or flight space. It's impossible. We know this. It's literally impossible. The eyes cannot see it. The body cannot perceive it. What seems so familiar and so right that our body reacts to is often that same thing that's going to lead us down that path of being re-traumatized, re-victimized. It's like our body's leading us right into the trap and we fall for it every time. It's that familiarity that we don't have the ability to choose. So in the extended conversation, Bill and I are going to share a bunch of stories about this. I think you guys will find it so fascinating how rapidly this can be changed, why and how. It really is some of the most fun and miraculous stories about how someone took themselves out of the worst situation and not only put themselves in the best situation, but the resolution is almost unbelievable. All right, you guys, we've come to the end of our time here on the UK Health Radio Network. You can hear the extended version and this version anywhere that you like to listen to your podcasts. So look up hashtag wellbeing podcast and look for the UK Health Radio station, the channel. And then you'll find New Life Perspectives radio under the UK Health Radio app. So it's hashtag wellbeing podcast, UK Health Radio, and New Life Perspectives radio. Also, you can find us on YouTube. It's under the Cognomovement channel. It's COGNO and the word movement. And you can see Bill's and my face and whoever else we have on as a guest. It's a lot of fun to come over there and see who's actually doing the talking. So until next week, we'll have another brand new exciting topic. Be safe and be well. And if you have the availability, join us on the extended next. Thanks for having this conversation with me, Bill McKenna.
Thank you, Liz.
All right. We'll talk soon. All right. Welcome to our extended conversation on the New Life Perspectives radio show about victimization, victim shaming, and the idea of taking responsibility for your own actions, your own self. We started out this conversation talking about a rabbit hole that I went down of watching this Cults to Consciousness podcast where people talk about being in high demand organizations or religions and how people are kept in those organizations. And sometimes that is through this idea of you're responsible for everything that happens to you. And we talked about in the bigger body of the show, that's not always resourceful. It's also not necessarily true. And there is some real value in recognizing your own part in it so that you can get yourself the heck out and not get in that situation again. But Bill and I were talking about how so many of these things we don't even know are there. They're hidden in our nervous system. Again, we're talking about trauma being an experience you had that taught your nervous system to be in fight or flight around that topic. But there are some really interesting things that actually cause what would be called trauma in the body. One of them we were just talking about off camera is a concussion. A concussion can be equal to or responsible for what seems like a trauma. I had a young woman, she was only 14, who came to see me, and she had this really big deal happened when she was 7. And this really big deal that was trauma really sounded to me like a regular little kind of family issue with a cousin, and the cousin said they did something and they didn't, like kids fighting with each other. But it had really impacted her and it stayed with her. Well, it turned out that immediately before that incident and immediately after, she had a concussion. She was in karate. So those concussions sandwiched that kind of an ordinary experience had her nervous system believing that that was the root of all evil. Basically, her body could not get past it. So, of course, we did the work that Bill and I did with Cognomovement, and we help the body see a brand new perspective. We help the body turn off the automated response around the concussion. It also helps the brain work a little better, push information back and forth across the corpus callosum and get the hemispheres working and get the body out of fight or flight. Well, afterwards, minutes later, she's like, oh my gosh, that's just a regular thing. That was a kid. She was 7 too. And also, there were reasons. At 14, this kid was able to realize the reasons that that other kid did what she did. And that instead of feeling victimized for herself, really she needed to have compassion for this other child. And it was instant, Bill, as you know. This happens, right? Sometimes what a person thinks is a trauma as a childhood is somebody gave them a little side eye, looked at them in the wrong way. Now, maybe on that day, their underwear was too tight, or their stomach was upset, or somebody had just embarrassed them, or mom and dad were fighting, or, it was cloudy and they got rained on, or they stubbed their big toe. And the body will record all of those injuries into that side eye. That person was judging me. That person hates my guts. That person wants me dead. Or none of it's true. Maybe the person didn't even look at them. But the body will record it as a real and distinct injury. And here we go. Everybody looks down on me. Everybody judges me. Everybody hates my guts. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. Guess I'll eat some worms. Life, right? Gets built out of something like that.
It makes me think, Liz, that, have you ever met anybody and you knew their family? You knew mom and dad, and then you knew the kids, and the kids grow up, right? We all go through a natural cycle. We become teenagers, and then we become adults. And if you watch the children closely, you have a relationship, you may notice that mom or dad has a perspective like, well, they talk about you, or, or they, people, they're not to be trusted, or, this was one, I didn't even know it. Okay. I'm going to tell a story on myself here. So funny, right? When I was younger, I thought I invented estrangement. I thought I invented it. I thought this person's acting like a SOB. And I'm going to, what I'm going to do? I'm just going to shun them and block them off. And so that there's nothing, they can't get to me, because I don't really want to face them or condemn them in some way, on account of there's other relationships that you don't want to disturb the intra-connected relationship. So, I know what I'm going to do. I got this trick, and anyway, I just found it so funny because I was talking with my mom, and my mom was talking about my dad, and we're just talking about friendships and stuff, and she goes, oh yeah, your dad, he used to do that all the time. All of his friends, he'd do this whole shunning and pushing away and cutting off and all these things. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's not even me. It's not, I took it on and I thought I was brilliant. I invented it. It's like, yes, this is how you do it, son. Nobody ever told me. I just thought, oh, this is how you do. But this, being in the position, Liz, and, right, that we're in, right? We see this all day long, where the same thing with the parent is the same thing with the child in the responses, right? And you take great offense to something. Oh my gosh, they're doing this to us. Oh, right? When it's not even a thing.
It's not even a thing. It's so true. Another one of these, I had a person who really had an issue with the way they were raised. This situation that happened when they were less than 1 year old, 1 year old, and maybe a little older than 1 year old, 1 to 3 years old. And it was a potty training issue. And they really, really felt their whole lives and that their parents were should be responsible for this abuse, quote unquote abuse, that went on with them. Well, the unique thing about a Cognomovement session is we literally run through all the files, the physical files in your brain. We use the eyes to do it. And a lot of times a person will see the whole story. You know, who was that used to say, and now the rest of the story? Do you remember that radio show?
Oh, yeah. That was like a TV show.
Oh,
right?
I loved that. Yeah. And now
that guy's voice too. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, the rest of the story was, as he saw this whole thing play out and really felt as abused as he believed he was, he felt the anger and the blame and the resentment. This is the cool thing. You get to have all of it. Nobody says you shouldn't during a Cognomovement session. And as we worked, and his mind, his brain, actually, everyone's brain holds all the memories, and the body too, holds every last one. Some people who have eidetic memory, all that means is that they can pull the file. Most of us can't pull all of our files. But with Cognomovement, you get to see a lot of them very often. And what he saw was, oh my gosh, my parents were children themselves. They were like 21 and 22, living with the grandfather who'd been a military man. And he had this idea about how you potty train kids. And it was militaristic, big surprise. But what he also saw, that was his grandfather loved him dearly. It was one of his most valued relationships. And they were all just a little stupid. Like, nobody intended to hurt him, but they did make some bad choices. It wasn't that they didn't love him. They loved him a lot. And they were trying to give him an advantage in life through the stupid method. No one had any form of malice.
Just children raising children.
Yeah. And so he remembered himself as a parent. He was never that young of a parent, ever. So we kind of got to walk through, have I ever, right? Using the have I ever model. Did you ever do something in raising your kids that you're like, oh God, I wish I knew better. I wish I didn't do it that way. If you're a parent, every one of us has thought, maybe I should have done that different, right? And in being able to realize that he can't hold them responsible unless he can hold himself that responsible for how he raised his own kids. So that was a logical mind realization. But in the process, his physical body collapsed that pattern of fight or flight and allowed him that ability to see, you know what? I've been an idiot myself where it came to raising my kids once or twice. And I really hope they forgive me as I'm able to forgive my family. But at that point, it's not even a forgiveness. That's the way it seems, but it really is just a nervous system letting go of the traumatic pattern. So I just find these so fascinating, how often a trauma isn't. It's really just something that happened in your life that in any other circumstance would just be an ordinary Tuesday.
It's really interesting. I gotta tell on myself again. I remember this is how subjective trauma is. Our traumas, two people can have the identical experience. One can be traumatized by it, and another one feels nothing. And to varying degrees. And I told this one story where I had a bunch of friends come over. I was in Catalina Island, and I had all these friends come over, and I had given them the first class treatment, and they came over, and we were, by this point in our 40s, right? And well in our 40s, and there they are, drinking and carrying on. And a bunch of stories came in from all over, because I was a local there. People were like, "Hey man, I don't know about your friends here. You got to rein in your friends, this is not good, and I was mad. I was like, "Oh, just get the heck out of here," because I was like, "You guys are irresponsible, drinking and cavorting and hooting and hollering and, inappropriate, whatever." And, and that really irritated me. I told the story to somebody. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm so mad about this." And they weren't mad about it. They were mad because I had provided all of this kind of first class treatment for them. The whole thing with the cavorting and drinking and hooting and hollering, no response. Could care less. That was not upsetting at all. It's like, "Oh, you took advantage of me financially." I felt nothing. But my point is that the same identical circumstances, someone will take offense to one thing and feel hurt by, and another person. So it's just it is completely subjective, and we gather these traumas from our life experiences, right?
Yeah, it's true. And at the same time, I don't want to make light of some of the things that really are horrific that happen.
That is absolutely true. We're not making light of it. We're talking about different, different
No,
methods.
there are so many things that seem like traumas that are not, and there are 1,000 perspectives to be seen. And that is the importance of finding a way to clear this out, to figure out what really did happen. And then there are things, I knew someone once who actually had seen, I know 3 people who saw their parent kill their other parent and then themselves. Now, I think that says something about me that I know
3 people?
3.
Liz, what the
do.
heck? I don't know anybody who's had to witness that one.
Yeah, I know 3. And I mean, you could never put that on the child who experienced that. Never, ever, ever. We would all agree that's a trauma. That is
horrible.
a trauma.
I mean, it's horrible.
Now, so just because it's actually a verifiable, real thing that would be horrific for anyone to have to witness, it still does not mean that a person has to carry that with them for the rest of their life and react as though that were happening today. What do I mean by that? So we said, trauma is an experience you had and that taught your body to be in fight or flight. It would make sense why the brain and body would see that again and again and again, right? But it's really the same as though you have the movie that you hate the most in life, like The Shining. If I knew what was on in a building, I would not walk into that building. Like, I hate that movie. I would never want to see it again. It's like watching that again day after day after day to remind yourself that you don't want to watch it, that you still don't like it. That doesn't make any sense. Well, it's really the same for our nervous systems that will play out these patterns and show that movie again and again and again. It really doesn't make any sense. The likelihood of that happening again is next to 0 for most people. I mean, less than 0 would be like getting struck by lightning 4 times in a row. So there really isn't anything for your nervous system to protect you against. And yet it will continue to run out the pattern and have it be the biggest building block in your life. Well, what Bill and I know is that that's not necessary. It isn't necessary for trauma to continue to shape your life. It isn't necessary, no matter how big that trauma is, for it to create the automated responses and control what you do and what you say and how you think and how you feel. Even with a trauma like that, it can be neutralized in your system to where it's exactly like a book or a movie over on your shelf. It would be like, for me, I know The Shining is in that catalog right over there in that bookshelf. I know it's there, but I'm never going to pick it up and watch it again. You keep your memories, you know what happened to you, and you also might be able to see a much bigger picture about the reasons that happened. And then you're free to move forward. You're free to have a life without it. We had a woman who had a horrific childhood of abuse and carried it with her for many years, but she worked on every way she could find. She worked to clear this out of her system until one day she was at a Cognomovement seminar and it came up one last time and cleared itself out of her system. Before that, she'd had this horrific relationship with her mother, holding the mother responsible for the traumas in her life. Immediately after that seminar, she began this wonderful, lovely relationship with her mom. From today forward, unheard of in this trauma, informed trauma, world. Most of the time, you're encouraged to keep taking it with you, keep talking about it. Now she's in a place where the relationship is new. They're building from now forward, not from childhood forward.
Right.
It also creates a situation where that person is now free to have a real conversation with you about their life, about what happened. Sometimes there are reasons, right? It allows that no longer to be this big chunk of lead in the middle of your life. It clears it out and you can go forward, which I think is ultimately the most important thing. But let's talk about where it's a perception that's not real at all. You've told so many stories about this, about especially a lot of wives and husband stories.
Gosh, there's been so many times where it never even happened.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't happen the way somebody thought it did. They literally just kind of made it up. There was not only that, but actually seeing another perspective. There was a trauma that happened to this one woman who was threatening to break up her marriage because there was a daughter who had been injured, and she had thought that the husband was basically avoiding his responsibility in the worst of circumstances. And what she ended up figuring out during a session, one of the things about Cognomovement is that we have access to the subconscious literally through the body. And we have these techniques to find the original event. And it's conscious, right? When we did that, she was able to see that the husband was actually doing the worst part of the job, supporting her and her daughter, the thing that she couldn't do, literally physically could not do because it was so traumatizing. So it is, it's a very real thing.
It really is. It's so often our bodies do this, and it really is our body. It's a function of the limbic, the autonomic nervous system, that is really, it's this great tool when you need to get out of the way of a lion, right? There's a lion on your butt. You need this system to go into action and get you to safety. The problem with it is, a lion can be literally that popsicle you didn't get when you were 4, somebody giving you the side eye, an opinion you've learned, maybe in one of these high, these religions that could be considered cults, or even just regular religion can do it a lot. Give us guilt and fear and shame, that kind of thing. It can be all of these things added up. But the thing that Bill and I know is that it can also be changed very, very quickly. It can be removed. It can be deleted. It can be reset in a way that your system starts clean today. And that's what really all of us need, no matter where the victimization came from, no matter where the trauma happened, real, perceived, misconstrued. The important thing is recognizing how it feels in your body, that it's so familiar, and that it's the thing that stops you. Those are the things that you can utilize to assess, can I get rid of this? Can I get it out of my life, out of my body, so I can move forward from today on without it, right?
Exactly. This is the type of thing ultimately that we're talking about. Being free. Once you're free of the feeling of this trauma, literally, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is you recall it and you feel something about it in your body. You may even feel numb about it. You say, I feel nothing but numb around it. Well, that's a feeling as well. And it may have been such a significant thing that you cannot process it. It's overwhelming. And so you literally can't even face it. But when this is done, when it's done where you literally feel nothing about it, you're not avoiding it, it literally becomes something that you don't think about anymore because you have no pain around it. It literally is just like, you may have skinned your knee when you were in grammar school, but you never think about that time you skinned your knee because you know what? It's over with. It's, it healed up and I don't have any pain over it anymore. At the time, it was the worst thing in the world, right? I like the way, Liz, I think you had stated this before, is like, there was a time we've all gotten a splinter. And the splinter hurts so bad. I do not like splinters at all. I'm sure everybody can relate, but you take that splinter out and that's it, right? You just don't, you're like a week later, do you even remember you had a splinter, or a month? You don't even remember it. It's over, right? It's behind you. And how many splinters have you had in your lifetime? Can you even recall it? The body is done with it. You don't feel anything. So you don't think about it. But if you had one in your finger today, I guarantee you'd be thinking about it a bit.
You'd be thinking about it. Right? You sure think about a stubbed toe when you got one. But
yeah, right?
Yeah, it's interesting too. There's another phenomenon that happens in the work that Bill and I do that really is like a quantum thing. And that is that when you do a Cognomovement session and you collapse this pattern, remember I said from the brain to the body to the brain, round and round and round. It feels so familiar. And you collapse that thing, it tends to change reality. And what do I mean? I mean that, like, let's say you have a person who is stalking you. We have had this situation in Cognomovement. Somebody was stalking someone else. Or someone did something bad to you, and maybe they're trashing you online or trashing you around town. Or maybe they just won't leave you alone, or their name keeps coming up. The situation keeps flaring up, like a really unfortunate zit on your face, right? How graphic. But it keeps flaring up. The quantum thing that happens is when you get to neutral on the subject, meaning your body just doesn't feel here nor there about it, right? You can see it from that 10,000 foot view. You're able to see how it has very little to do with you. That person that is such a thorn in your side does any number of things. One, and we've seen it again and again and again during the session, They call or text or whatever and apologize. Things that a person never in their whole life would expect an apology for, they get one. Or that person strangely fades away. You just never hear from them again. They're just not around. Why? There's no tractor beam for them. There's not a fight, there's not a blowout, there's just, oh, I don't know, I haven't heard from that person in a year now. Weird. Or the third thing is, all of a sudden you realize that they really love you and you really love them. That your perspective about them has been so skewed that you're completely missing out on this amazing human. Those are the best. When that one happens, it's beautiful. But when it happens that all of a sudden this huge trauma in your life now seems like nothing, and you just have no interest in thinking about it, and your body doesn't obsess anymore. It just fades out. And now there's space and room. Your body starts to heal, for one. A body in fight or flight is not in healing mode. It's not in creativity mode. It can't focus. There's not space for it to really feel and give love. So when that pattern is collapsed from the body, when the energy from it is no longer focused on this problem, it does all those things. It heals. Amazing things in the body start to heal. People create masterpieces or rearrange their house or totally, change their style, or, people are able to think so differently that they choose a new career. They move. They get the dream house in Florida. Yeah. I mean, we hear these stories again and again and again. And every last one of them is some version of collapsing an old pattern around trauma. So we started out talking today about, utilizing the tool of recognizing yourself in a trauma that happened to you. And there's resourceful ways. The way Bill and I do it is really resourceful, because you get to just notice how you feel about it and take responsibility for that part. Not blame, just noticing and letting your body tell the truth about how it feels, and then clearing it out. And then there's an unresourceful way where someone is utilizing that against you to keep you stuck. If somebody's utilizing that tool and it's keeping you stuck, that's your key, like you said, Bill, to get out.
Get out.
Get some help. Get another perspective. Or find a way to get that 10,000-foot view where you can see the whole thing. I think that's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line. Liz, this has been an awesome extended dance version of this of our program, and I hope everybody here enjoyed the talk. If you want more, Cognomovement.com, Cognomovement.com. There are two free ebooks there. If you put in your email address, you get those 2 free ebooks. There's a lot of videos there as well. Great stuff to watch. And we have our YouTube channel. Hit like and subscribe for more great content.
Actually, Bill, that jogs my memory, because there is one last thing a person could do. Coming up in the first week of October, we have our biggest event, the Cognomovement, Cogno Conscious event in San Diego. It's a live in-person event. You can't do this one online. And if you're a person who listened to the show and you're really related to it for yourself, that you have something that happened far back in your life that seems to keep playing out again and again, or plagues you, this is the event to change that for yourself. Because we move through all of those things that generally keep people safe: shame, fear, guilt, blame, anger, pride. We go all the way up to the levels of love, joy, peace, even enlightenment. So we are helping the body neutralize and see itself, see where it's holding a pattern. And we're doing this all day long for 4 days. It's one of those events that it's hard. There's just no way around it. It is a tough to get through event, and it's so much fun and so much magic and so many miracles happen. And the other thing is that the only people who show up there are the people who are really ready. And these are people that are so cool, that are so amazing, that have accomplished so much in their lives and have so much more to do, that it becomes absolutely imperative that they clear out these blocks that are holding them back. And those are the people who show up. So if you're one of those people, we invite you, go to cognomovement.com and click on the upcoming events. You're looking for the Cogno Conscious 2023 event. And we encourage you to figure out how to get on the path to come and join us, because life-changing is not exactly, it's not a strong enough term. It is really consciousness and many lifetime changing event. All right, you guys, you can find us anywhere that you can find podcasts where you like to listen, and on YouTube, cognomovement.com. Until next week, we'll see you all again then. Bye, Bill McKenna.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here with us on the New Life Perspective radio show. For more information or to find out more about the work that Bill and I do, please visit us at cognomovement.com or email us at info@cognomovement.com. See you again soon.